O'Neill will ring the opening bell. Dick Grasso, thank you very much.
Thank you, Lou.
We're going to go now to Atlanta for a news update. We'll continue in just a moment.
I'm Wolf Blitzer in Washington.
And I'm Joey Chen at CNN Center in Atlanta. We'll return to Lou Dobbs' Morning Line in just a moment. First, a look at the latest developments in America's new war. President Bush is pledging to rid the world of evildoers in the wake of last week's deadly terror attacks. The president is back at the White House tonight after meeting over the weekend, quite extensive meetings with his military advisors. President Bush confirmed today that he gave the military orders to intercept and to shoot down any commercial airliners that headed toward the White House or the Capitol during the attacks. The massive search and rescue operation at Ground Zero in Lower Manhattan goes on. FBI and police widened the search area today beyond the area of impact after the discovery of a passport belonging to one of the hijackers a few blocks from the crash site. New York's mayor says nearly 5,100 people are still missing. FBI agents are searching an apartment in Delray Beach, Florida, believed to be the home of at least one hijacker aboard the flight that crashed in Pennsylvania. Officials say another suspected hijacker may have lived in the same building. Agents also searched an apartment in New Jersey in an overnight raid there. Taking a moment now to take you to New York. This is St. Patrick's Cathedral, the home of the Archdiocese of the city of New York, and there you see Edward Cardinal Egan greeting with some of the city leaders in the church, a hug, a shared sadness for the city of New York. Also on hand, you see Governor Pataki, Mayor Giuliani, reaching out to each other in this time of crisis, reaching out as the city tries to move forward and go on. St. Patrick's Cathedral at the south. Now to Wolf.
Joey, Afghanistan has a dogged resistance movement called the Northern Alliance. That group controls just a tiny fraction of the country, but it's offering as many as 15,000 fighters to any U.S.-led attacks against the Taliban. For all its fervor, however, the Northern Alliance is reeling from a recent loss of its own. Here's another exclusive CNN report from Steve Harrigan in northern Afghanistan.
Wails and cries are for Ahmad Shah Massoud, the Afghani general who fought first the Soviets, then the Taliban. His assassination came just before the terrorist attacks in the United States. His supporters say the two events are linked, and they want to fight side by side with Americans in Afghanistan.
We want the destruction of the terrorist camps as well as the Taliban establishment, which have provided the facilities for the terrorist activities in Afghanistan.
Massoud led the Northern Alliance, which controls about 5% of northern Afghanistan, and has been waging an on-again, off-again war with the ruling Taliban for more than 5 years. Now they're calling for outside military strikes against their own nation, as well as action against some of Afghanistan's neighbors.
If the United States of America is able to stop the flow of support, arms and ammunition to the Taliban from Pakistan, I think it is half the job.
The Northern Alliance says it has 15,000 regular fighters and another 15,000 ready to join up. The test for the opposition will be whether it can survive the loss of its charismatic leader. Already some generals, fearing violence, decided to stay away from the funeral. Steve Harrigan, CNN, Changaran, northern Afghanistan.
Osama bin Laden insists the United States is blaming the wrong man. In a statement aired on Arabic television this morning, bin Laden denies any involvement with Tuesday's attacks. In fact, bin Laden claims the U.S. consistently blames him for any type of terrorism against it. He alludes to last week's terrorism being acted out by others because of what he calls personal reasons. Peter Bergen is CNN's terrorism analyst, and he joins me now here from Washington. What do you make, Peter, first of all, of this denial by Osama bin Laden?
The denial is sort of a routine denial that fits a pattern of other denials after the U.S. embassy bombing attacks in Africa, etc. If bin Laden is still with us several months from now, I think you'll find that he'll take a little bit more credit for this if indeed he is behind it. And so I think it fits his normal pattern of denying things right at the outset and perhaps later allowing some form of credit to come to him.
Because at some point after the explosion, the bombing of the USS Cole, he did effectively take credit for it.
Yeah, within about 6 months, he was basically saying that was a great thing. And in fact, there's videotaping floating around the Middle East recently. He says rather explicitly that he was behind the Cole, and he says the victory in Yemen and the Cole will continue against the United States. So that was almost a signal that this sort of thing was going to happen.
You heard the Pakistani ambassador to the United States tell me earlier today that her government was going to be sending in the next few days a delegation to Afghanistan to meet with the Taliban leadership and demand that Osama bin Laden be handed over to what she described as the international community. What do you make of that?
Well, it's sort of a double-edged thing, the Pakistani involvement, in the sense that Taliban was supported by Pakistan in the past historically and continue to be. The Taliban are not exactly a creature of Pakistan, but Pakistan was very instrumental in their rise to power. So obviously they have leverage over the Taliban. The question is, to what extent are certain elements in Pakistan's army and Pakistan's religious parties really on board with what the president is saying and what the ambassador told you, which is hand over Osama?
But let's get to the crux of the matter. If the Taliban, and there's no guarantee it will, but if the Taliban wanted to hand over Osama bin Laden to the United States, to the West, could it?
I think they could. That simple. I mean, they control the country. Bin Laden is on the record as saying that he's sworn an oath of allegiance to Mullah Omar, the leader of the Taliban. If Mullah Omar said to Osama, your time is up here, he would have to go.
And do you think that that's a realistic scenario, that the Taliban would turn in the face of this enormous international uproar against Osama bin Laden?
Well, if there was ever a time they were going to, it is now. You know, I mean, on the other hand, Osama has helped them financially and they're ideologically similar and they basically admire him. But if there was ever a moment, clearly this is the moment.
So you think there is a chance that the Taliban, a slight chance perhaps, but there is a chance the Taliban would reverse its course and hand over Osama bin Laden?
The Taliban is not a monolithic movement. There are moderates who are looking to seek closer ties to the West. There are hardliners. Unfortunately, the hardliners seem to be more in charge in the past year. Nonetheless, there is a factions within it that you can appeal to, and perhaps they'll. And at the moment, also, they're talking about their own self-preservation, which obviously changes everything. I mean, the Taliban are sort of on notice. If you don't hand over Osama, I mean, your history as a movement.
Now, you've been there. You've met with the Taliban. You've interviewed Osama bin Laden. You're writing a book about him. We assume he's in Afghanistan right now. Is that a good assumption?
I think it's a very good assumption. Where else is he going to go?
Well, I'm asking you, where else has he been? Where else can he go?
Well, you know, he hasn't been anywhere else since 1996 when he moved there from Sudan. And in a way, once he leaves the borders of Afghanistan, he's instantly exposed to anybody who might be going after him. He did contemplate moving to Yemen in '97 and talked about that, but that never happened. So Afghanistan is where he is, I'm sure.
And if he were hiding out there with the support of the Taliban, how difficult would it be for a U.S.-led military or commando special operations force to go in there and find him?
Very messy, I think.
Why?
Well armed, well motivated, know the terrain. United States operatives wouldn't know the terrain. These people are prepared to die. Bin Laden himself rejoices in the thought of dying in the cause of Islam in his own mind. So you're up against a very well-motivated force. It's not like the Iraqi National Guard, for instance, in the Gulf War, were basically conscripts who basically gave up without a fight, essentially. I think you're talking about people who will put up a fight if it comes to that.
I've heard it described by other experts as almost like finding a needle in a haystack.
Yeah, Afghanistan is a big country with lots of mountains and lots of places to hide. And don't forget that Osama bin Laden spent 3 years fighting the Soviets, hiding from them. He's not intimidated by superpowers, at least in his own mind. And he feels that his own exertion somehow defeated the Soviet Union. And taking on the United States is not a big deal in his mind.
Now, when did you interview Osama bin Laden?
In 1997, spring of '97, for CNN. Yeah.
And how long did you spend with him?
About an hour, because he wasn't going to hang around. It was quite difficult to set up, obviously, and also there were a lot of security considerations he had, and we weren't allowed to bring anything that might give away his position, anything that might conceal some kind of electronic tracking device. So they actually we filmed the interview on their camera. We weren't allowed to bring anything, even watches, or just our clothes. And he was clearly a serious man. He delivered words filled with rage against the United States, but they were delivered in a kind of measured manner. This man is not insane. He's rational, his outcomes may be insane, but his reasoning is that of a rational person. Obviously, what he's done is an utterly insane act, but to dismiss him as simply a madman who's mad at the United States would be doing a disservice to a much deeper phenomenon.
Peter Bergen, our terrorism analyst, thank you very much for joining us. You'll be sticking around. And we do have some breaking news. We've just learned that 4 arrests in this investigation have now been confirmed. We're going to have details at the top of the hour. We're also expecting a news conference from New York's Mayor Rudy Giuliani in the next hour. Finally, we'll explore the issue of whether the nation will need to conduct another military draft. Now back to our special edition of Lou Dobbs Moneyline. Lou?
Well, thank you very much. In the 5 days following the attack on the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, the National Air Traffic System has come to a halt. It has begun, of course, to operate at the margin, just haltingly at the beginning now. But it is, after losing $300 million a day and putting a number of carriers in jeopardy of bankruptcy, it is forever changed as an industry and as a business. Kitty Pilgrim has the story.
Lou, for the airline industry, the news keeps getting worse. Empty terminals for days, losses of more than $1 billion since the attack, and struggling to put expensive new security measures in place. And now one major facility, Reagan National Airport in Washington, is staying shut down. Defense Secretary Rumsfeld saying it's too risky to reopen it because of its location. And you can see on the map, less than a mile from the Pentagon and close to the White House. U.S. Air and Delta are among the main carriers that fly out of National.
The flight paths being right near the Pentagon, the White House, the Capitol building, it seems to me a necessity to close National Airport for a period, and I think it was the correct decision.
Airlines are trying to survive, cutting costs drastically. Continental is furloughing 12,000 workers and cutting schedules by 20%. Delta not running a quarter of its nearly 2,000 flights. United, Northwest, and American are cutting their flight schedules by 20%. Now, a third of most airline costs come from labor, but cost cutting alone won't save an industry that was expected to lose more than $2 billion this year, even before the incident.
I think will be the first of several airline announcements in the first week here. There's going to be Delta, Northwest, American, United, all following behind because none of those carriers are going to be operating at full strength.
U.S. Transportation Secretary Norman Mineta is planning to meet with the heads of the country's major airlines next week. They will be discussing the beefed up security measures, but also what can be done to help the industry financially. Lou?
Kitty, thank you very much. As Kitty points out, with the airline industry, it's all but a standstill, just beginning to operate again. When America returns to work tomorrow, it will be a test, and a severe test, of the nation's transportation system. Lisa Lida has that part of the story from Chicago.
Please proceed now to the pickup portion.
Chicago's Union Station is jam-packed this Sunday afternoon. Amtrak ticket sales have surged 50% since Tuesday, especially for long-distance trains, like the one this medical researcher took from Boston to Chicago, en route home to Albuquerque, New Mexico.
It was loaded. I think every seat was taken.
Greyhound also reports a 50% jump in sales, and in some cities near airports, business has tripled or quadrupled. Many business travelers are avoiding the airports. Whether it's because they're afraid to fly, their flights are canceled, or they just want to avoid crowds and delays. But there was no crowd at this United ticket counter.
I came to the airport early because they said, be here 2 hours early. And I don't know, at least for me, it took me about 5 minutes to check in. So I've got another hour and 40 minutes before my flight.
You'd never know this was Chicago's O'Hare Airport, one of the nation's busiest. There is very little traffic, plenty of parking, and the check-in lines are surprisingly short.
Hoping for better odds at catching a flight home to Los Angeles, this man drove 13 and a half hours from Atlanta.
I had reserved a car for Monday morning and was planning to drive home to get home. But I'm glad I'm going to potentially get out today because it's my wife's birthday.
Business travelers are usually impatient, accustomed to speedy check-ins and last-minute flying. Now there is a different attitude about inconvenience.
I really think it's a small price to pay for being safe, and we'll accept that.
Lisa Leiter, CNN Financial News, Chicago.
Well, inconvenience certainly will be a hallmark of transportation, particularly in the air in this country for